Welcome to This is Wealth. On this podcast, we ask, what is wealth? What does wealthy really mean to you? Most of us immediately think of money, but honestly, wealth is so much more than that. If you have health, deep friendships, a supportive family, you have great wealth. My name is Liz Crawford. Get ready to be impacted. Today, my guest is Suhail Arastu, who was raised in San Antonio, studied neurobiology and classics at the University of California, Berkeley, where he also competed as an NCAA gymnast. He continued his studies in Philadelphia, where he began graduate program, but 3 months in decided maybe this wasn't for him. So he decided to move to a small Japanese mountain village for a year of contemplation, deep sea fishing, hiking, skiing, and teaching. From there, he traveled the world by ship under the auspices of the United Nations Economic and Social Council before returning home in 2008. That return home created a gym for San Antonio in Suhail. He's been appointed to various commissions and board by local and federal political leaders. I have admired his experience and multicultural view of the world for quite a while. Be ready to learn with me and to be inspired. Suhail, welcome. I'm so glad that you are able to join me and our audience today to talk about some really important things. I want to kick off and just have you share a little bit with our audience about yourself, the things that we're not going to see on a resume. Tell us who you are, and that will help explain where we go from here.
Well, thanks for having me, Liz. I grew up here in San Antonio, but I come from Indian immigrants, and my parents were born in Hyderabad in the south central part of India on the Deccan Plateau, and immigrated to the United States, first Canada, then the U.S.
Okay.
And my mom was a flight surgeon and lieutenant colonel in the Air Force.
Wow.
And so she ended up doing her immunology fellowship here at Wilford Hall, which is what brought us to San Antonio. And though I was born in Omaha and my sister's Canadian, my brother's from Phoenix, we all consider San Antonio home because we grew up here. And graduate of MacArthur High School, I was a gymnast in college competing in Junior Olympics, and then went off to the University of California, Berkeley to compete in NCAA athletics as a gymnast, but also pursue my interests in neuroscience and classics. And after graduating, went off to the East Coast, where I started my graduate school studies, thinking that I wanted to pursue research medicine. But sometimes you don't know until you try.
Right.
And I realized about 3 months into the program that I couldn't spend the next 8 years of my life in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
So I filed for leave of absence, and I moved to a small fishing village in northwest Japan, which I like to call my year at Walden Pond.
Why did you pick Japan?
It wasn't specifically that I wanted to be in Japan, but my whole life had been so structured in academia and athletics, military mother, athletic upbringing, rigorous academics, that I really yearned for a free-form learning environment in a place that I didn't know, and a place that I didn't know anyone. And I also love the sea. I'm a water sign, and I love being by the ocean, any body of water really, rivers,
Yes.
lakes. And I wanted a place also in the mountains because I love skiing. And I found that place in a small fishing village called Takefu in Fukui Prefecture, the northwest of the main island of Honshu. And did a lot of reflecting and deep sea fishing, hiking, skiing. I taught part-time there to pay my way. And subsequently ended up working for a Tokyo-based NGO under the auspices of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. And that really gave me global perspective because we traveled the world by ship and spent time in over 35 countries on 2 global voyages,
Wow.
circumnavigating the globe, both through the central route, the Suez and Panama Canals on my first voyage, and then south around Cape Horn, Cape Good Hope, southern route on my second voyage. And though we'd grown up traveling because I have a big family, 52 first cousins on 5 continents.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
This project took me to parts of the world that I had never visited before, and we worked on development projects ranging from looking at the displaced Maasai people in East Africa who have no concept of land ownership and are in the slums of Nairobi, in Mombasa, to Antarctic observatory missions, to organic farming projects from Malta to New Zealand, and getting kids off of the streets of the favela and in programs with music, dance, and gymnastics to allow them to focus and create society outside of what was happening in their
Right.
community that was so dangerous. So really gave me some global perspective. And then I came home back to San Antonio in 2008 to help with the family business.
How old were you when you did the NGO where you were at sea, traveling, seeing all of these places?
I would have been 23.
So very impressionable, seeing the whole world and seeing the highs and the lows of the world as well. It's got to make a huge impression on you.
It does, because you grow up a certain way in a certain environment, and it was already a big change going from San Antonio, Texas to Berkeley, California.
Yes. And then Berkeley to Japan.
And then Berkeley to Philadelphia, which was also very different than to Japan. And again, growing up traveling, I did have perspective, but that gave me purview into parts of the world that I didn't understand or know or have any awareness of: culture, societies, languages,
Right.
geographies, and that was really impactful.
I often think there's a difference between traveling, which you can kind of, for simplicity, equate to being on a train, seeing out the window, looking and engaging, where you're meeting the people, you're seeing their lives firsthand. You get a taste for a day in the life of, and that's completely different than just whisking through.
100%.
Those engagements stay with you, and those, I think, are parts of the things that help form who we are 10 years later. It's those little tidbits you take with you.
It's true. In fact, my mother passed away a few years ago suddenly, and as my parents would always take their eldest grandchildren on an adventure every summer to explore a different part of the world. They'd go to Europe, Vancouver, Switzerland, Spain. And when she passed, I vowed to continue that tradition.
Very cool.
And when my nieces and nephews, I've got 3 nieces and 3 nephews, turned 16, we planned an adventure together to a place that neither one of us has ever been, so we can explore it together.
I love it.
And that experience, just like you said, is something that's invaluable. It's impressionable because they're 16. And my eldest niece, when she turned 16, we went gorilla trekking in Uganda. My nephew, when he turned 16, we went surfing in Sri Lanka. And it was just the 2 of us, because otherwise you're with family and you're having
Right.
a great time and there's all kinds of things going on in conversation. But to have one-on-one for upwards to 10 days, you really get to experience someone in a place that's new to both of you, and it's a learning experience both externally and then between each other. So I think they value that, and I certainly enjoy that and relish the one-on-one time with family.
It's bonding. We always call it investing in memories. Those are memories that they will have for the rest of their life, no matter what happens. They'll always remember that time that you took them.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Really special. Given your multifaceted background, what first drew you to the arts? I mean, science to arts is a big turn, although we've talked about music as math, and maybe it's not that far of a turn, but what keeps you committed to the arts and culture and all that that entails?
Yeah, my life, as I mentioned, was very structured in academia and athletics. And when I filed for my leave of absence in Philadelphia, which happens to be where the nation's first theater, Walnut Street, is, I had my apartment lease for a year. And though I only did 3 months in the program, I stuck around Philly and I enrolled in movement and improvisation and musical theater. And I was always a little envious of my younger brother who went to St. Mary's Hall and was like student council president. He was at Thespian, and seeing the stuff that he was doing, because I was so committed with sport, I couldn't really do anything else. And so I kind of explored that, and I really enjoyed it. And I've subsequently, when I'm called upon, done short film, theatrical work. I MC events. I've done stage theater. And it was my time in Japan. We traveled, as I mentioned, by ship, that I met this physicist who happened to play piano really well. And during his time in the United States for a competition, he came to stay with me in San Antonio, and just like I'd done on the ship, I organized a performance for him here. And that's how I came into the arts, through musical bridges around the world. And really with no intention of staying in San Antonio. Back when I moved here in 2008 during the recession, I was helping with the family business, compounding immunotherapy during the day at my mother's immunology clinic. And then in the evenings, we have a gymnastics center. So I was coaching and running the front desk.
3 jobs.
Yeah. So that was keeping me busy. And I I had planned to go back to Japan to work in photojournalism. I love
Wow.
photography, and that was my intention. But I sort of rediscovered the city I grew up in, and that I didn't really know. But by sort of peeling back these layers of an onion, I discovered something very special and became involved as a board member in this performing arts company after organizing a performance, and then later serving on staff, and then getting involved in different aspects of the community through the arts.
Isn't it funny the lens we have when we're younger of where we are, where we live, what's happening, and then you go away, you come back with a more mature look and you're able to see different things about your city, or even some of the same things through a different lens. It's got a different complex or hue to it that just changes.
Yeah, it's like we're boomerangs.
Yes.
And I've had a number of friends that have come back from high school. It's kind of like when I was a kid in Phoenix, Arizona, every time somebody visited, we'd have to go visit the Grand Canyon.
Right.
I dreaded the car trip. I was like, this thing again, looking at a bunch of rocks. But then going back as an adult, it's so much smaller in a way, because when you're a kid, it's like
everything's big.
And then you're like, the majesty of what you had in your backyard, you took for granted. And it's sort of the same way here. This is a very special city and a great community.
It is. It is. I like that it's a little bit off the radar, though, truthfully. It's what helps keep it a gem. Tell us about musical bridges around the world. You started to talk about how you get involved. What sets it apart? Why is it different than others? And what impact is it having here in San Antonio? But that's not its only reach. So talk about how it's much beyond San Antonio.
Right. Sort of like the namesake, musical bridges around the world. The organization was actually started back in 1998 by a Soviet-born, classically trained pianist by the name of Anya Krakovsky. And she trained as a pianist at the premier conservatory, the Gnesin in Moscow, and came here with her then husband, Valery Krakovsky, who was a professor of piano at UTSA. And during that time, she had no knowledge of the English language or how anything functioned in this country for that matter, but would oftentimes have her Eastern European or Russian friends come and play. And there was one time she was organizing a concert and she didn't realize that he was actually coming, because he didn't confirm even though he said he was. And then next week he was like here, and she wanted to put on a performance in a partnership, but the venue was no longer available. So some piano students of hers were like, well, just have a house concert and we'll pass around the basket and then people can contribute to your professor's airfare. And she's like, okay, well, that's very kind of you all. And after he played, the experience was so great for her students and the community up here in the Hill Country and Dominion area. They said, oh my gosh, if you've got more friends and professors, can you bring them here and we'll do more house concerts, because this is really special. And then fast forward a little bit, Father David Garcia, who was rector of Cathedral San Fernando at the time, the oldest continuously operating Catholic sanctuary in the United States, we're so fortunate to have in our city center.
Yes.
He had just come back from sabbatical in Europe, where he saw great houses of worship activated by chamber and classical music outside of Mass. And he thought, what a wonderful way to welcome people into the house of God.
With creativity.
With creativity, and to just recognize the beauty of the architecture and who knows what else they'll be inspired by. Can we do that here in San Antonio? And so he heard about this woman having these private house concerts and said, well, if your musicians are going to be here, would you mind sharing them with the church? And she said, no. I mean, in Soviet Union, that's kind of what churches were used for, because they didn't have much in the way of religion at times. So that's how Musical Bridges was really born. And they would pass around the collection plate, and then after a couple times of her UTSA fellow performers and professors inviting people, they recognized that artists actually need to be paid.
Right.
And so beyond passing around the collection basket, these few women came to Anya and said, look, you need to incorporate it as a nonprofit so we can collect donations to make this thing run. If it's going to be a regular series. So one of the women was a lawyer, one was a CPA, an accountant, and they all got together and they formed, incorporated in 1998, Musical Bridges Around the World.
That's excellent.
And that's how the organization was born, just out of request. And Anya, again, coming from the Soviet Union, had no intention of starting a nonprofit. In the Soviet Union, as in many countries, arts are a pillar of society, so they're supported as such. We're fortunate in many ways. I mean, of all that we have in the United States, but at the same time, we're a very young country. And arts sometimes is seen as discretionary, as entertainment, as value added, instead of really a core pillar of society. We believe that it is essential. And if you think about it, like, why do we work so hard doing what we do?
Right.
It's to create our environment. Fashion is art.
Right.
Culinary art is what we eat. We live in art, architecture.
Right.
Literary arts, musical arts. We watch television.
Well, we listen to music
arts.
too,
Right.
but it's got a base.
Yeah, they're all art forms, whether they're supported through purchasing power or they're through the nonprofits. But at a foundational level, they're so important, we believe,
Yep.
for children to have access to the arts. And so just like the program at San Fernando Cathedral began, the artists were here and the schools said, these are great international artists and maybe we can share them with the schools. And the schools were like, well, that's great, but how does it contribute to our learning and our curriculum? Because we've got to teach to this test. And so we thought, well, if they're coming from around the world, that's geography and social studies, and they're learning culture.
Love that.
And so we would gather the students in the largest space, the cafeteria, the auditorium, the gymnasium, and the musicians would perform. Fast forward a decade or so, and one of our funders said, well, this is great what you're doing, but really, how does it impact their learning? They're getting exposure from artists that are international. So we tailored a program which we now call Musical Sprouts, using arts as a vehicle for education. Because if you think about it, everybody learns in a different way.
Right.
And a child who doesn't really understand math by looking at an equation on a page, they can listen to percussion and then they learn, if it's in 3/4 time, that's actually fractions and it's math. Just
Exactly.
like wind moving through a brass instrument, that is Bernoulli's equation, right? They're learning physics and they might not even know it, but it gives them access to the information in a different way. And we've taken it a step further because during the pandemic, we created these cultural literacy modules so the children could travel to different parts of the world and they get to spend money to learn currency and math. They get to explore geographies. So for example, with Spain, we had the director of education, the McNay, walk through some of the Picasso collections. They learn geometry through art. They'd visit our World Heritage UNESCO missions and learn architecture and engineering. They'd go home and make a fridge kale paella with a Spanish cellist and getting their family involved. So this integrated approach, allowing them to experience cultural literacy, but at the same time, learning their core curricula.
It's a layered cake. You've built so many things into it, and yet it's fun on top of it all.
Right, and the administrators and the teachers love it because the kids stay engaged, especially when they were learning virtually at a distance. My sister's kids in Fort Lauderdale were doing handstands, and she didn't know her kid was missing class for 2 weeks when they started it. She's like, what have you been doing? She's like, I was practicing my handstand. She goes, well, he was practicing something.
Yeah,
but
right.
He wasn't in class. And his teacher's like, where has Rahel been? And so,
on his head.
Yeah. But this approach to really allowing it to be immersive and integrative is much more interesting in their retention. Their test scores prove it. So in that way, over 2.5 decades, Musical Bridges has made inroads into the public sector, into the academic sector through schools, and then seniors. We believe that great art should be accessible to all.
Yes.
And even when performances publicly are free, we think we've lowered the barrier to access completely. But the reality is some folks that are seniors who have mobility issues aren't able to travel. So then we take the concerts to them in their retirement communities and senior living facilities, and that we again lower that barrier to access.
There are so many wonderful medical studies about the brain, and even if you lose language, you don't lose the musical side, and there's still communication that happens. The notes of the music, the lyrics, they come back to you, and I just think it's such a complex organism, our brain. And yet I feel like in so many ways we only feed half of it. And the arts is the creativity, the fuel for the other half of the brain. So imagine walking around with one arm tied around behind your back. You're limited to what you can do. But if you're really feeding the brain properly, both sides work better and they work off of each other. I just think we have not fully tapped how the arts, music, poetry, all of these different aspects really impact the brain overall. And our quality of life, our perception of life, what we feel is rewarding, all of that is enhanced when you have the arts as a part of your life day in and day out. And I think about communist Russia or other places where things were taken away from people, and what did they have? Well, it's the living memories in their head. And you have to build off of that. But there are wonderful memories. There are songs. There are these things that keep you going, keep your heart moving, and to not prioritize arts, again, I just feel like is putting one hand behind your back and saying we'll be fine as a society with, one pillar instead of two holding you up.
No, you're completely right. And it's evident. Those with arts education have twice the graduation rates. It's double. And so we know. And the other thing is, the sad thing about arts being the first thing that are cut when budgets are cut at schools, because exposing kids to arts at a young age allows for creative problem solving. That doesn't mean that they're going to grow up to be an artist. Whatever sector, engineering, law, medicine, banking, you have to be able to think creatively and problem solve, right? That's the biggest asset, no matter what your field is.
Right.
And so losing that is a detriment. Agreed.
No, there's a lot more to be done there. Why do you think the arts are such a powerful tool for building community? We have a lot of different people here. How do you use the arts to bring people together to create that community?
Arts creates a sense of belonging. It incites curiosity. It inspires people through its beauty. It challenges people when they don't understand. Why do we go see opera? Right? It's all the things that you might be thinking of but can't actually do that happen in Greek tragedy and opera that are manifested on stage. And we stand behind the stage and we appreciate the beauty to which it's brought to life. With music, we have something called Unity Fest. And less than 47%, I think, of Americans have passports. And what that means is that most of our general population is not traveling outside the United States. And because of the nature of news media, the coverage often tends to focus on conflict, negativity, violence. And so we aim to counter those stereotypes by showcasing the beauty, the culture, the creativity of different parts of the world.
Yeah, we need more of that.
I'll give you an example. When we first launched this festival, we had an Israeli-Palestinian piano duo that played together.
Wow.
We had an Armenian visual artist with a Syrian clarinetist.
Wow.
A Ukrainian soprano with the St. Petersburg string quartet from Russia. So when people set foot in the concert hall, they think they know these places from the news, and they're like, how are they sitting in the same room, much less creating art together? But it's such a powerful message, and when we have talkbacks and conversations after the concert, and people who had a certain way of understanding these regions and these people see them creating, and they recognize that what we hear is sometimes political strife that's happening, and it's a lot of noise, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Exactly.
And we can connect over this universal language, in our case, music, that transcends the religion, the socio-economic barriers, the politics.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so it's a very powerful force for uniting, for cohesion. It doesn't matter what people believe in, they can appreciate beauty. And at the same time, whether, again, it's theater, whether it's challenging, inspiring, they're all things that I think advance our species, our human beings, and allow us to connect and appreciate all that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful. How do you see music and cultural programming helping to dismantle stereotypes or bring people together across different lines of difference? I think you just hit on a great, the Unity Fest is a prime example of that.
Yeah, and further, we took over a couple years ago the San Antonio International Piano Competition, and we renamed it the Gurwitz in honor of Ruth Jean Gurwitz, who really gave our founder an entree into the classical art scene when she first came to San Antonio. But through that, now we bring the world to San Antonio, because we've had 76 applicants from 21 nations across the globe apply, and then a preliminary jury narrows that down to 12 semifinalists, which we fly here and have homestays around the city. We can't put them in hotels because they've got to practice like 10 hours a day for 4 rounds of competition. And we invite the community. Our top piano students become junior jury. We bring in an international jury, but it's all free and open to the public. So what our community gets to experience, and our community that's tuned in virtually across the globe, is able to experience this beautiful art of piano that's combined in solo recitals, in commissioned work, in world music from the home country of the pianist who's advanced, as well as celebrating San Antonio's Latin and Hispanic culture by playing a work, as well as playing with full symphonic orchestra. We've brought in the Gwangju Symphony Orchestra from our sister city in Korea.
Wow.
Last year, we brought in the Mexico City Philharmonic for the final round of the competition. In the future, we'll work with other foreign orchestras from our sister and friendship cities, which brings the world to San Antonio, and again, allows us to transcend these borders and create real human connections and partnerships. So it is powerful. There's nothing more powerful, I think, than if you're not traveling, than to meet someone who has a different belief system, language, upbringing than you, and being able to connect over something common.
Well, I love how you're bringing the world here and giving so many people a chance to experience it together. How did you grow your global audience? You mentioned that twice now. How'd you find that audience? Yeah,
we used to only be a live performing arts company here in San Antonio. But during the pandemic, we were forced to be innovative. We didn't want to shut our doors. We had artist contracts signed for the next season, and we maintained those. And we have the power of video,
right,
and internet. And so we were able to either hire film crews in other countries or ask our artists to hunker down in their studios or homes. And it was interesting. Sometimes, we had a young couple of artists, piano violin duo, that had a newborn kid.
Oh, wow.
So imagine how many takes we had to do. And they were like, okay, this is a window that we can record in. But sometimes we'd hear the kid in the background. But it was real.
Right.
And it was very
what
special.
Everybody's dealing with.
Yeah. And so post-pandemic, we didn't want to lose the virtual audience that we had grown. So we thought, well, this is something special that we've created for San Antonio. But now that we've got a virtual audience, maybe we can expand that. So we hired this young marketing kid, and with search engine optimization and hashtags and all the things that happen on TikTok and YouTube, he's been able to now really amplify that viewership. I'll give you an example. We post shorts now of our programs, public programs, and we had this comedic violin piano duo from Italy last fall called Duo Baldo. And I got a message from them just a day before Thanksgiving. I was at my sister's in Fort Lauderdale, and they said, are you doing some kind of paid promotion on the video that you posted about us? Because it's got 45,000 views. And I said, no. And I looked at it and I said, sure enough, it did. And next day it was like 75, then 100, 250,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2. Now we're at 3 million views, Liz.
That's incredible.
And we have 10,000 followers on the channel. And what's interesting is that here in San Antonio, we don't even have 3 million people. So we know it's, and then you look at the comments, and they're in Bulgarian and Russian and Spanish and Chinese. So we are truly now musical bridges around the world with all eyes on San Antonio. And so through this platform, we've been able to expand our presence and share the great art that we're creating for our community with a global audience, which is very special.
Amplifying it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible at what, I don't know, we learned during the pandemic in many ways, and what we've kept from the pandemic. I often think that, we were all forced to slow down and really stop, and that in and of itself was a gift, but you were able to look at your life and say, okay, what things are improving my life and adding value to it, and what things are sucking the life out of me that I would like to get rid of. Not sure we got rid of all of them, but it was a chance to take inventory and make some decisions. Mm-hmm. And I just can't imagine how incredible and beautiful this gift was during that time for people when they couldn't go places, or, some people were more locked up than others. And this is an outlet that just speaks to the soul and feeds it. And that's a really beautiful thing.
It's true. And for some of our member concerts, we would have the artist with us live. And so on the Zoom screen, you can see everybody. And it was, because otherwise they're just waving at people from the doorstep.
Right.
And so to be able to see and have a conversation where people were disconnected for such a long period of time, to be able to see their friends that they hadn't seen in a year. And
I bet. I love the creativity of what you all did.
Thank you.
It's really beautiful. So let's talk a little bit from your perspective. What makes a nonprofit a good investment for foundations or donors? How do they look at what's happening in the organization and decide, that's a great place to put money? What are some things that they should think about in that regard?
I think when we look at donors, we want to understand what their priorities are. And people have different passions in life, whether it's social services or animal care or health. And with the arts, we believe it's universal because everybody appreciates it.
Right.
And there's so much opportunity because there's not so much support from the public sector where there might be for other programs. And so it's an opportunity not just to support a nonprofit, but really to drive the economy and contribute to local city. I mean, if you think about it, Steve Niven, who's our chief economist, was of the cities at St. Mary's Hall, put out his latest numbers, and there's a $4.8 billion annual economic impact from the arts sector just in San Antonio.
Wow.
We employ 20,000 people in the creative sector, and that's $200 million in both local and state tax revenue. So we know that it's a big player in the economy. It's $6.1 billion at the state level. And so when arts are invested in it, not only increases the creative outlet and invests in workforce, but it also creates a better place to live.
Right.
And so we see art on so many levels, whether it's public art through sculpture that's supported by the city government, or whether it's theater or opera, the visual arts. And it's things that you're investing in the future for your community and the next generation. I'll give you an example. Is when Tracy Wolf told me this story when she and Nelson were trying to recruit Ed Whitaker to bring the company here. We were trying to attract a Fortune 500 company. Ed Whitaker asked the question, do you have a symphony? And I've never seen it at the symphony. I honestly don't think he necessarily really cares that much about classical music, but that was his barometer. Because he knew that if there was a healthy symphony, that infrastructure, education, parks and rec, health, it would be a good community for him to move his company, for his executive team, for the families of his workforce to be able to raise their families and invest. And so I think it contributes to the overall picture. Now, the nonprofits in the United States obviously fill the void of what's not being taken care of by social services, by the public sector. So that's where we aim to fill the gap. And so it's so important for donors to look at what their priorities are, what they want to invest in, and see the return on their investment. We know that, again, due to economic studies, $1 invested has a $5 return.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful.
And that's just the arts sector. So it's a huge return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, if you're looking at bringing a major corporation to town, you want to know that there are interests, for everybody, but you want to know that the infrastructure for each of those interests is strong enough that it can support them all. One's not falling while another is rising too high. I think when we looked at COVID, everything dropped except food security. That was the first and foremost. And then we learned, oh, wait, you can't put everything over here because now there are all of these people without internet at home and they can't go to school during COVID. And so, there's maybe this gut reaction to things, but if you unpack it a little bit, you'll see the threads that go across the fabric of our society. And arts and that creativity is just something that many kids need. This is just me, but I think about ADD and all of these, mental issues that kids are having. And I'm like, well, for one, they're not meant to sit 8 hours a day in school. They're supposed to run around and play and smell the grass and, feel the outside dirt in their nails and all of that. I mean, we're humans. We're not meant to sit in a climate controlled environment all day long, every day. And yet most of us, that's what we do. So having this outlet for creativity that speaks to us in our way is super important. And for some people, that's music. For some people, it's dance. For some people, it's reading. But without that, we shut down such a section of what fuels us and the world becomes grayer. So
yeah, it's true. And what we find, speaking from a musical bridges perspective, like if you were to come to one of our concerts at San Fernando Cathedral, free and open to the public, world-class award-winning artists. And there's a really interesting cross-section of attendees there. You'll find parishioners that stay after Mass and save their seats.
Yeah, to get a good seat.
To get a good seat. You'll have kids that come for school credit from their music class.
Nice.
You'll have our patrons and donors that attend. You'll have downtown residents, downtown visitors that see the sandwich board on Main Plaza that are interested and invited in. You'll even have homeless people that otherwise would not have the opportunity to be uplifted and inspired.
Right.
Because even a low ticket price, like a $5 charge would be, that's a meal for somebody. Like the threshold that could be a barrier.
Right.
And so by eliminating that, we create that access, that opportunity. And sometimes people will say, I teach yoga also. People say, oh, yoga's not for me. I'm like, well, if you're not flexible, yoga's actually is for you. People say that about the arts. Oh, art's not for me. And then we go through the examples of like how many ways art is integrated into their life. And I had a friend of mine actually who, when I first moved back to San Antonio, he asked me to serve on a couple boards, and then I asked him to serve on musical Burgess board when I got involved. He goes, oh, I'm not really a music person. And I said, well, okay, well, maybe just come to a concert with me and enjoy. And he really enjoyed it, and he ended up joining our board and starting our endowment and become a big fan ever since. But sometimes you don't know till you try.
Right.
But you have to be able to have that access.
Right.
And so from a donor's perspective, when they're contributing to, say, an arts organization, what they're doing is allowing an arts organization to exist, to be sustainable, to thrive, and that gives people access, especially in a relatively poor, socioeconomically challenged city like San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have talked about you can't think of funding as nice to have for the arts. It's essential to have for the arts. Otherwise, we're letting down a whole part of our community, a whole part of our infrastructure, in how we experience our city from every socioeconomic level, visitors, people who live here, all of this. I mean, the arts aren't an option.
Yeah. And our culture and arts festivals draw 5 million visitors a year. So that economic impact is not just San Antonio residents. And we have a department at the city of San Antonio called the Department of Arts and Culture that is exclusively supported by what we call hot money, hotel occupancy tax. Mm-hmm. So it's our visitors that are drawn to our amazing, rich culture, heritage, and art in San Antonio that are supporting this department and over 38 agencies and festivals. So it's so important because we're a convention town, we're a visitors town, and that's part of our pride that we share. But also for ourselves, we have to invest in the arts for our next generation. And sometimes the challenge is philanthropy, whether it comes in the form of corporations or foundations or government. You talk about infrastructure, but part of that is not just the building.
Right.
The buildings are great, but you've got to invest in the human capital, the creative capital that keep those buildings relevant and thriving for the future.
It's funny. My kids are all college age and exiting, and so as I talk to other parents, my daughter had some friends that were ballet their entire life, but then ultimately at some point you make the decision, either I need to tap out because I'm not going to be good enough on the global stage, but what am I going to do? Or you say, I'm going to push through and continue on and see how far I can take this. It's interesting how many kids say, I love this. This has been a passion of mine for most of my life. I'm going to find some way to make a business in it. And so they learn the business of arts, and they learn how can they support these organizations, whether it's, through the booking of shows, the accounting side of it, which you'd think ballet to accounting, but it's all there. And there are ways to make a living in the arts without being on the stage. There's a whole ecosystem that we don't really think about when we're going to these shows and seeing things, but there's a whole economy around the arts that's super important and that we have to be training people for. Do we have enough training abilities for those? Do we showcase those enough for kids to think about those things?
This past Sunday, I attended the Jossie Awards. Are you familiar with them?
Mm-hmm, I have heard of them.
So Jacelyn Pace runs that organization now, and it was the Las Casas. Now it's called the Majestic Empire Foundation. They just acquired the Josephine Theater. It's the largest of its kind in the country.
Wow.
And they awarded $600,000 in scholarships. But what was so amazing about the awards show was not the kids just receiving the scholarships. They showcased, and there was a jury that's renowned from Broadway and all over the country that's present. But what I thought was really special is they brought the kids that are backstage, the ones that are doing, working and studying lights and sets and sound, because that's a big part of the equation. You don't have one without the other. And I have so much admiration for what they do and the way it's San Antonio and South Texas. And those awards, kids from Harlingen, from McAllen, and from, of course, Northeast School for the Arts and others are taken across the country to the best theater schools and given scholarships to represent San Antonio and then hopefully come back. But that's the thing that's challenging, is that you create the great talent and you want to give them a reason to come back. So that's why it's important for us to invest in a thriving music theater scene. And we have 9 youth orchestras with mariachi, with ensembles, a philharmonic through YOSA. They do an incredible job, but when these kids go off to the top conservatories in the country, we want to make sure that there's something for them to come back here and be a part of.
Right. I know when you first told me that number, I was like, no way. And then you start naming them. I'm like, oh, yep. But I don't think we as a community put all of those together and think about it. It's a big impact. Those are a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids. Yeah, and they've got a great program right now. They're getting a headquarters. And so at Musical Bridges, we build bridges. And so we partner with as many of our agencies that we can see partnerships with. And so that, I think when you asked earlier about what makes us unique is building those bridges, and whether it's our youth scholarship, that we look at the next generation of talent and how they can get into, it's not just about becoming a performer, but when you train as a performer as a young kid, obviously you're honing that creative part of your abilities, but also you're learning to have a stage presence, to be a good communicator, and to be present and to present.
Yes.
And that can
go to any industry.
Absolutely.
Translates. Yes.
It does. It translates. And so that's so important as an investment. And whether it's Sam Ministries or Haven for Hope or the Soldier Recovery Unit, where we have our programs, these are all opportunities for us, and it's all through need. They're all requests. We're not going around saying, you need this, you need this. It's all requests. And so that's what we do, is we serve the community, and that's the role of a nonprofit, to serve the need in the community.
I think you've done a phenomenal job with this organization. It's just, every time I hear about it, I learn something new, and the reach and the breadth that it has just shocks me. And the fact that not everybody knows who you are, and yet you've had this huge impact. So we're going to do our best to share you.
Thank you.
Musical Bridges works with students across the region. We've talked a little bit about that. Share a story that highlights the impact of this work in schools and underserved communities. You're just talking about kids from Harlingen, which, for those that aren't familiar, is the very southern part of Texas. It's a very poor area. There's not a lot of industry. It's people leave there to go find jobs, and they're starting to see some come back, but there's a real issue with how are you going to support yourself? What are you going to do?
Yeah, our service area is primarily Bexar County, and there are many kids in San Antonio that are not leaving their neighborhood, much less a city, state, or country. So by bringing the world to them, we're opening their eyes to the possibilities. And we have questions all the time after our performers come as a culminating end of a segment. It's like, I was presenting India the other day at one of the schools, our partner schools, on their career day, and a kid raised his hand at the end and said, I want to go to India.
I love it.
We showed pictures, and we showed the music and the dance, and we share that, and we have 21 school programs coming up with this segment of our Musical Sprouts program. But giving them that understanding that they too can one day travel to this place that has little kids just like they are. And we created a program with Wuxi, our sister city in China, once, where the kids used to be pen pals. Remember when we used to write letters?
Yes, absolutely.
It's much easier now. You just hop on a video. Timing can be difficult when you're dealing with Asia. But we did that. And it was so fun for the kids to get on video. And I think our kids were practicing less their Chinese than the Chinese were practicing their English, but it was cool to see that exchange. Yeah. And we do it through the visual arts. We do it through our kids program. The Syrian clarinetist that we work with, Kinan Azmeh, was once performing at Colonies North. It's a school in District 8, which has kids that speak 34 different languages.
Wow.
A lot of refugees. And a little girl came up to him at the end and said, thank you for sharing my music with my friends.
Wow.
Because she was maybe one of the lone Syrian immigrants, happened to be in that school. And to hear this guy playing her music, she's like, this is...
my home, yes.
Yeah.
This is part of home for me.
And it was very special. And when we took that same Syrian clarinetist to the Jewish Language Academy, and we held up the map of the Middle East and said, okay, well, he's from Syria. Can anybody point to Syria in the map? Nobody had any idea.
Wow.
What about Israel? They all raised their hand.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, this is your neighbor.
Right.
And this is a guy that creates music, and he's from Syria, and he's your neighbor in Israel. And it's like their eyes get really wide, and they're like, okay, because it's part of a greater order. It's a part of a bigger world, and they get to be a part of that when they experience this program. And so exposure to youth, and again, we work with transitional facilities, with Title I schools primarily, and giving them that opportunity. We had one of our community engagement teachers by the name of Caleb Gonzalez said that one of the kids out of the program was invited to an awards outside of the city and asked the question, well, do we have an airport? Like, they hadn't left their part of town. Or do we have to go to Austin? Like, that was a real question. And so understanding community geography, then expanding beyond that, gives them not only the opportunity to participate in travel. We work with sister cities in Washington. I serve as a global arts envoy and try to share all those programs and contests for youth artists with our community. So it gets them engaged not only in what they're doing locally, but on a state, national, and international level.
It just opens their eyes to the world beyond their
world of possibility.
Their backyard, their little border. We have borders that we put in place ourselves all over. I want to touch just again on funders. How can funders ensure that their giving truly supports access to the arts, not just excellence on stage, but inclusion off stage too? We've talked a bit about that. If you're a funder, how do you think about the whole ecosystem?
It's an important question, and going back to what makes us unique at musical bridges around the world, there's some great performing arts companies in our community, but again, that barrier to access is a ticket price sometimes, and many of them do education programs, which are all fantastic, and we partner on them as well. But what makes us unique is that universal access, whether it's the seniors, the kids, the public, all free. In order to make that work, when you have no earned revenue, everything's done through philanthropy.
Right.
So we do have a core operational grant through the city. We're working with different partners to find public-private partnerships. We also have corporate foundations that believe in us and support us, as well as family foundations, and then we have membership series. So all of those pieces together allow us to comprise our budget with our small and mighty team of 8 that produce 130 plus events per year.
It's incredible.
And so from the donor perspective, when they're looking at what their priorities are, if access is one of them, if excellence is one of them, then we fit that bill. And depending on how they want to invest, we love to have people experience our program. We invite them to the schools to see what the kids, I could talk all day long, but until you actually experience the program and see the reaction on a kid's face, or go to the cathedral or see the artist in person, it's not the same. It's really not the same. And so then they said, oh, well, we love this program. So they find alignment and might become, we have opportunities. The Russell Hill Rogers Fund for the Arts has been a longstanding supporter of artistic fees of our program at San Fernando Cathedral. So we've named that in their honor. We have opportunities like that with Sprouts, if people believe in that. For the elders, for the seniors, we have an endowment which we're trying to grow from our 1.1 million to 10 million, so that operations through a 5% distribution can be taken care of, so we can really focus on programming rather than existing, which can be stressful at times, like now. With changes in federal government funding, indirectly, we're experiencing some pain points because our funders are telling us we can't support the arts right now because there's other immediate needs. Food insecurity.
It's a waterfall.
Social services. So the trickle effect, the waterfall affects people in the nonprofit sector. And so that's very real right now.
Yeah.
So from a donor perspective, whether it's sustainability through contribution to an endowment, they can leave legacy through our legacy program. They can invest in a specific program that kind of meets their interest. And so there's all kinds of opportunities for people to align their interests and where they see the value for the impact of their contributions.
Thank you for sharing that. You wear many hats in your 8-person organization. How do you approach leadership? And specifically, what advice do you have for others looking to bridge you're doing art, culture, and civic, but anytime you're trying to bridge over to other areas, it's hard.
It's true. After being back in San Antonio a couple of years, I felt like, oh gosh, well, the art space is great, and kind of we know what's going on. We know everybody in town. And a friend of mine, Susan Oliver Hurd, did this program called Leadership San Antonio. And after she finished the program, she called me up and said, you really need to do this program. And I said, why? And what is it? And she goes, well, it's a leadership program, and they don't have many arts people, and I think you need to get involved. And so I signed up for Leadership San Antonio. And what was interesting, when I thought I knew San Antonio, as I walk into this cohort, I knew one other person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's people from sectors of engineering, of law, banking, industry, government. But it was such an enriching opportunity for me to share my perspective and my world, and them to share theirs through these different days that we have. And that led to me being part of the German Marshall Fellowship through LSA people, and spending time in Europe as a fellow, and connecting what we're doing as a community here. And then our current mayor, Ron Nirenberg, used to be the general manager of the jazz station. So that's how we got to know each other.
Funny.
And so when he became chairman of the board of Sister Cities, he appointed me, and that's led me to become involved with Sister Cities in Washington as a global arts envoy, India chair. And through Sister Cities, I was asked to serve on the Semi-Quincentennial Commission, the council. So I've moved from international to now arts, culture, and heritage, and that's coming up, our 250th birthday as a nation in 2026. So we've got all kinds of great programming looking at where we come from as a people that created this nation, where we are today, our challenges, and our vision for the future. So they're all conversations that I've been able to have through the arts, but with civic engagement. And I'm now in my 11th year serving on the San Antonio Arts Commission.
That's fantastic.
And we have a sister city organization called Anuja, where we have the largest city-sponsored Diwali in the nation right here in San Antonio. So they are multiple hats, but they all kind of serve my same ends, is awareness of all of the great arts that we have, that we can participate in, that we can patronize and enjoy and experience and share. And so that's kind of my underlying personal mission. And they say that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I feel like I work hard, but I really love the work that I do, so it's a lot of fun.
I love what you shared about that story of just stepping up into a leadership role in a civic way, but finding there's a hole there for your industry, and yet having then the exposure to all the other industries and they to you, and then it leads to this beautiful path of continued possibilities to share the story and to learn all along the way. It's really phenomenal. We're
lifelong learners. And I think if you're receptive to that, there's so much.
Life is better.
Yeah. It becomes more interesting.
It does. It does. I agree. Looking ahead, what's your vision for San Antonio's cultural landscape, and how can people listening be a part of shaping that future?
Advocate for what you believe in and get involved. That's what they told us after we completed our leadership, is that whether it's a nonprofit or a commission board, serve. A friend of mine, Eduardo Parra, he's a civil engineer.
Love him, yes.
He's a civil engineer, and they told him, you need to serve on this opera board. He didn't know a thing about opera. He's the chairman of the board now.
Yeah, I know.
Like, that's so great, is you have somebody with really no understanding, maybe no interest, and now they're the chairman of the organization. Like, how special is that? And they get to share this great art form with people that also may not know about it or have had interest in it, and elevate their experience and their environment. And so to advocate for what you find interesting, to explore what you don't know about in the unknown, to take that challenge and say, okay, well, I'm not an arts person, maybe step into a museum on a free day. We've got plenty of them at Sama and the McNay, to go take in a performance, to go volunteer and be part of a nonprofit and just see what they're doing. And then if you have the capacity to serve on a board or a commission, if you've got the time and the wherewithal, and it doesn't have to be with your expertise. For a nonprofit board, we want people from all sectors of society. We want people in law to share their talent.
There's a place for all of those skills. Yes, it's still a business being run.
Absolutely. If they've got banking experience, that helps us understand what banking priorities are, and maybe there's corporate sponsorship opportunities with their service. And The list goes on and on. It doesn't really matter. It could be graphic design. It could be you're in the literary arts and you are with a performing arts company, but all of those are assets. And there's great organizations here. I mentioned Leadership San Antonio, but there's also the Master's Leadership Program for folks that have maybe served in their corporate role and ready to retire and maybe discover what opportunities there are to serve in the community. And that's great exposure to different nonprofits across the sector. So I would say get involved and advocate and be a part of the conversation. And that's going to determine our landscape.
Right.
Because if people don't get involved, then certain art forms will cease to exist. I had a great conversation a few months ago with a guy by the name of Teddy Abrams, and he started as the music director for the Louisville Orchestra in Kentucky and took a small company to a really prominent level. And he did it by building and by being relevant in the community. And that's what it's about. It's about not just sharing your art form, but it's about listening. What are the community needs? Because San Antonio is a very unique community. What works in New York doesn't necessarily work here. What works here doesn't necessarily work in Santa Fe.
Right.
So we have to really put our ear to the ground and see what the needs are in our community. And I think the needs here are an investment in human capital, because we've got good infrastructure and it's being built even better. We've got good theaters when you come from an arts perspective and in music halls, but we have to make sure that both the next generation are participating, interested, educated, and then we have to develop the patrons. Because if you didn't grow up listening to symphonic or classical music, why would you go now? So that culture has to continue, and the opportunity to participate in that culture, to get people, but at the same time, it has to be relevant. So we believe very strongly that when we bring this excellence and talent from across the globe, we tap into local ethnic communities and grassroots organizations that may have ties to that region. And so we intentionally invite them. For example, when we had the Gwangju Symphony Orchestra, we reached out to the Korean community. And probably 60% of that hall was filled with Koreans.
It's fantastic.
And they came from near and far and may never have set foot in the Tobin, or they might not have even really known about classical music.
Right.
But because we were in the Korean grocery store and the Korean restaurants, they're like, wow, the orchestra from Gwangju is coming?
Right.
Like,
I'm going to go see that. Yes.
And we'll bring their family because it's free.
Right.
So there's no barrier.
Wow.
And they've learned now about the Performing Arts Center. They've maybe learned about classical music. And our Western audiences, that's all familiar, they got to hear this Asian orchestra from Korea play arirang, which is a classical folk song, but also play Western classical music. And so that was very special. So you have this great, San Antonio's this confluence of cultures, right?
Yes.
But we're an old city and we honor our heritage. And so it's important that continues, and that only continues through investment, both through time and, as we say, treasure and talent of our leaders.
Yeah. No, I know it's never ending. It should outpace us, and it should grow bigger than where it is today. That's success in my mind. Speaking of, our podcast is called This is Wealth. So how do you define wealth in your life?
I feel that I'm extremely wealthy. I have an amazing group of friends. I have a phenomenal family. I have a city where I serve, where I feel like my work is valued and appreciated and supported. And that makes me feel very rich. I have the opportunities to explore different parts of the world, which I've done historically in my upbringing, and then also I continue to do now because I just have a wanderlust.
Exactly.
I love to experience new parts of the world. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that and bring those experiences back to my community and share them. Things that I've learned, people that I've met, lifelong friendships, whether it's through leadership programs or fellowships or through personal travel or through family, because the friendships that you create and that you invest in they're for a lifetime, and you get to be a part of those people's lives, and you get to continue to connect with them whether they live here. And now with the power of social media, you can stay connected with anyone everywhere.
Amazing.
With my big family, we have WhatsApp groups, but we also, everybody knows who's having a baby and who's getting married because we can share pictures.
Yes.
And having that community both physically and geographically present, but also having a network that's extended to places where you want to continue to grow and explore is enriching opportunities. So yeah, I feel very fortunate, and I feel the more that I can create and share, that also I feel fortunate when I can share the experiences that I have with others and enrich their lives, and that makes me feel better about my role and the way that I serve.
Yeah, no, they're priceless gifts that you give to one another in those shared experiences. Suhail, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Liz, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you. Well, there are so many great conversations that come from discovering the true wealth in your life. And I feel that when you see wealth for more than money, you will have true clarity in what matters to you. And that clarity will help you in every decision you make. Thank you for spending time with us. I look forward to the next time you'll join us. And remember, wealth is a lot more than money.